In my last video, we started chatting about the vowels of an ultimate claims experience. And we started off with A, anticipation. Now we have to move over to the big E, right? Expectations. So let's jump into it. Now, of all the vowels of a claims experience, I believe that expectation setting is probably the top vowel. And why is that? Because if you're not the one setting the expectation for your customers, they're setting it. And at that point, you have zero control. The difference between setting that expectation and not means you go from full control to zero control. By doing a great job of setting that expectation, you can control the entire claims process, even the way it resolves, from that first conversation and the way you set that expectation. But there are two things we have to think about when we're talking about expectations: attainable and reasonable. Now, attainable, obviously, you have to be able to hit those goals. And even if that goal is so impressive and it sounds great to you, your managers, the customer, if you're not able to meet that goal, what good is it? If you're setting such a stretch goal for yourself to really impress that customer, you're never going to meet those goals, and that's only going to prove to make it a worse customer experience. And on the other side of the coin, we have reasonable. Just because something will never ever happen a certain way, that shouldn't be the bar that you're striving for. Just because it's never taken you 10 days to send out an estimate to one of your customers, that doesn't mean that should be your bar. If it takes you 3, maybe 4 days to get that out, those are the time frames you should be using. It's that combination of attainable and reasonable that's going to set you up for success. Now let's go back to last week's video where we were talking about anticipation, the A of our vowels. And we talked about a specific example for independent adjusters. In that example, we were talking about when the customer can expect to receive the estimate from us after we write it, go through our IA firm's QA process, and then the carrier's QA process. And although we give a lot of transparency about the process and that there are different steps along the way, it really doesn't set the expectations for us and what the customer needs to really know about that process. What does it mean to a customer when I say, after I write it, or after it goes through the QA process? That's all gray area at that point. If we're not setting numbers and specific dates and times when they can expect each of those processes to go through, there's going to be doubt or a chance for a misunderstanding. If there's gray area, there is room for misunderstanding, misinterpretation, and that's going to lead to an unhappy customer. So we need to make sure we're very clear about our time frames. Now, we're talking a lot right now about setting that expectation for the customer, because if we don't do that, the customer is going to set that expectation and we lose control. Because we don't know if that customer is very laid back and easygoing, that they're not expecting answers for 2, 3, 4 weeks, or on the other side, they're a type A personality where we say, you know what, I'm going to write that estimate when I get back to the office. They expect that in 20, 30 minutes. So if we set that attainable, reasonable expectation for that laid back individual or that type A personality, we're all on the same page right now. Now, my good friend Doug Brode, he actually challenges me a little bit on this when I talk about setting the expectation for the customers. What Doug says is that the customer should be part of the expectation setting. In that example of the estimate, what Doug is proposing is that we ask of, when do you expect to have this estimate back? Or when do you need it back? That way, you know exactly at which speed you need to move for that customer. My concern with Doug's example there is we don't know what that customer is going to say, and that could set us up for failure. If they turn around and say they expect it the same day, and we know based on our caseload we're not able to do so for whatever reason, that could get us off to a bad first step with that customer. But on the whole, I think Doug has a great perspective here, where he's talking about that communication. We're making the customer part of the journey, and that's really what's going to separate out that experience from being a great experience from a not so great experience. So whether you're setting that expectation for the customer or you're working with the customer to set expectations, let's make sure we're setting those attainable, reasonable goals, and we're not only meeting those, but we're exceeding those. I'll see you next time when we start talking about the I for the vowels of an ultimate claims experience. But until then, JB out.